Simon Poulton is the guy you call when your search strategy is on fire and your dashboard's lying to your face. He's part data whisperer, part chaos translator. The kind of marketer who can talk to AI without needing therapy afterward. He's built a career decoding the noise, calling out marketing's sacred cows, and reminding us that sometimes the algorithm isn't broken. We are. Buckle up, because this is the ADOTAT Show.
Multi-billion-dollar complex federal court litigation. We do it day in, day out. And we've built a team dedicated to doing nothing but keeping you safe in the most dangerous litigation in the world. We're comfortable where everybody else is horribly uncomfortable.
And with the litigation piece, we bring the compliance piece, right? That's what I'm adding. That's what my entire team is adding. We've built TCPA World only for you folks to help you folks out.
And now, Pesach Latin, the rabbi of ROAS, the guy who makes ad tech execs squirm and jargon cry for mercy. Host of the ADOTAT Show, he turns industry spin into confessions and chaos into clarity. One brutally honest episode at a time.
I'm Pesach Latin. This is the ADOTAT Show, where we pull back the glossy case studies and get real about what's actually happening in advertising. Today we got Simon Poulton, a guy who knows more about search measurement and marketing chaos than most of us know about our own dashboards. First of all, let's start with the gentle lob. What's going on and how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today. Gosh, I've just been playing around with Gemini and trying out a few new prompts to create a variety of bizarre videos in VO3 that I'm using to promote our internal fantasy football league at work. So just being nerdy, basically. How are you?
Good, thank you. So are you currently in a stable, loving relationship with your AI search agent? Or did it just try to sell you a Peloton?
It's complicated. No, I am, but I don't know. I'm not necessarily in a committed relationship, but we do have a lot of affection for each other. So, I have a lot of affinity for Gemini, but, I'm always open to new experiences with different chatbots.
So we used to think of SERPs, like prime real estate, like being on Fifth Avenue during Christmas. But now it's an uncanny valley nightmare. AI is hallucinating. The answer is pre-baked, and marketers are left praying to the gods of Google that will be featured in some half-lucid SGA blob. So here's the actual question. What does search strategy mean to you when the user isn't searching anymore?
Yeah, well, I don't know if the user isn't searching. I think there is this idea of a behavioral shift toward conversation. But the idea of search is somewhat of a construct that was defined by the UI, right? It was the limitation of the UI. It was the fact that I couldn't search in natural language, that when Ask Jeeves came about, we had to be advertised to that you could ask it a question rather than just use words. But no one has a conversation by going into a room and just yelling, yoga pants! That would be a weird way to interact. It would be a weird way to ask things. But that's sort of the way we've been conditioned to search, because we are keyword here. I blame AOL, really.
Do you have kids? Because that's exactly how kids talk.
I do.
They come scream at you and they go, hungry!
Yeah, and they often hallucinate things too, like, the door hit me. I'm like, the door did not hit you. You sound like an AI right now. No, I think the idea of what search is just changing. And so people are still actively inquiring about information. They're looking to discover. What does that mean, though, for the future? I think it means an experience where we should be less concerned with clicky behavior, because click usually denotes I didn't get my response from wherever I am. I need to go deeper into a subject, rather and more of a focus on how are we informing the agentic proxies in that moment in time to have those conversations on our behalf, which is a little bit scary for folks. It creates a measurement problem, but ultimately there is still search strategy here, and there's still a SERP experience. It's just more in the form of a conversation.
So I just noticed we both have guitars behind us.
Oh, we do? I can only see a little bit of your screen. What kind of guitars do you have?
I have I love, this is my PRS with, whoa, just knocked my camera over. Bat inlays.
Very cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Just, it looks better than it is, but
Well, these are just the ones.
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would take full credit for your meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
That I can keep in the house. I've got a few. I started as a bassist years and years and years ago, and actually that's how I sort of got into advertising and everything when I was around 13. Started making websites for bands. When I grew up in New Zealand, made one for my band. We started playing at bars, which we had no right to do. And when we would turn up, they'd be like, "Who are you?"
But you're from New Zealand?
I'm from New Zealand. Yeah.
Oh wow! You're the second person in 2 days from New Zealand.
No way.
I mean,
Who was the other
the
person?
guy yesterday was at. I recorded him like 11 o'clock here. I think it was like 4 a.m.
God.
He was like half asleep. Poor guy. I didn't even realize it until afterwards. I'm like, what time is it? He's like, it's like, I just woke up.
Wow. Yeah. Well, no,
But you're not there anymore.
I'm not there anymore. I've lived here in the United States for, almost 20 years, which is
Wow.
odd to say in that I am
Do
more
you
of
miss
an
the
Angelino.
sheep?
I miss the sheep. No, look, there are elements of New Zealand that I miss, but also part of the reason why I made the move years ago was an appreciation for bigger things and bigger opportunities. And while I always have a deep affinity for New Zealand, it's always just a little bit smaller. And this is one of the challenges of New Zealand is like, even look, a lot of people who love it, they go to Australia. And I'm just fortunate that I was in a position in my life where I could move to California. So it's
going back
a great
to
place.
on topic.
Sure, absolutely.
We talk a lot about a agentic ecosystem. Are we talking about a helpful personal AI assistants or digital handlers that decide when the toothpaste brand I am loyal to before I can even brush my teeth?
Both. Right. I think the nature of an agentic ecosystem is this broader world where you will have all kinds of agents operating with you, operating in various different ways, maybe even talking to each other. We're really in the early innings right now of what does it look like to have an agentic-enabled digital experience at all times, or even an agentic-enabled life. And I think what we're seeing, from Anthropic with MCP and how we think about that model, so the model context protocol, how we're thinking about that, and agents actually interacting with each other, we'll see what this starts to look like. So there are going to be bad agents, good agents, agents that want to sell you things, agents that want to help you, just like there are people out there who want to push and swindle you, and there are people who want to help and be engaged, and it's a sort of a secondary layer to that ecosystem, just like the human ecosystem.
So you've said before also that the removal of levers doesn't simplify things, it just makes the incompetence more obvious. Can you unpack that with a real client experience?
I genuinely do not know when I said that. Where did I say that?
On the sheet that I have here with notes.
But I don't. Did I put that in the pre-call notes?
I don't know. It's just in my notes now. Sorry.
Oh, good. I don't know. I don't know when I said that. Do we want to cut this, or do we want to keep going? I can keep going.
Oh no, we'll just go to another question and pretend I never said that. I might keep it in to make me look dumber than I usually do. Hey, it's better than the time that I told a person about a book they didn't write. That's exciting. It was the interview for the next day. It turns out, but
yeah. Well, you know what I have is there's 4 Simon Poultons out there actually. One of them is a climate change researcher. One of them is a bassist in the UK who's like a pretty good session musician. And one of them is the CEO of a company called Kasna in Australia. And then there's me. I have a good amount of SERP dominance, but of course this guy, the climate change scientist, well, he's writing educational periodicals and all these things. He dominates the SERP far more than I do in terms of my name.
You never dated Thunberg or whatever her name was. Wrong guy. Yeah. Sorry.
Right, wrong guy. No,
there goes all my questions.
Yeah, all of the follow-ups happen to be I do get random confusion that I've seen when I do deep research on myself within Gemini, where it goes into like, Simon did this thing. I'm like, I did not. I'm fully in the digital advertising and marketing ecosystem, so.
Yeah, my A gets it wrong. Like I consulted for the Secret Service, and it says in big letters I was a Secret Service agent.
Oh, but if you were, you couldn't tell us anyway. So
no, it's really secret. But anyway, so I think maybe this question is for you. Do marketers actually want AI-powered search to work?
I think this is for me. Yeah, I think we do. And that is because ultimately the experiences that consumers want to have should be efficient, and they should be tailored to them, and they should be optimized. And there's a lot of waste in ecosystems that aren't that optimized when we think about certain exposures to ads and those moments. I think right now we are in the crossing the chasm moment where we're seeing LLMs learn, and we're waiting on the sort of the network effect moment. It's kind of like early Google, long time ago, when it didn't have the network effects yet. It was good, but it wasn't like it became in terms of the quality of that experience and the relevance of those ads. I think the more that we see the future of AI search, it is terrifying for sure, but it is going to be a better experience for consumers, and it will ultimately yield better potential results. And I think there's a whole world of multi-advertising experiences that we haven't even seen right now. Text is such a constrained medium to text. And that's ridiculous, because nothing else in my life is so constrained to text like that. I should be able to get a video ad response. I should be able to have an interactive moment with an agent who's actually having a conversation with me in that moment, speaking with me face to face. Those are some of the ad experiences I think can evolve out of this AI search moment, and that's why I'm particularly interested in seeing this succeed. Plus, look, any moment of disruption in our industry, it's actually a really good thing. this is the kind of thing that keeps us all employed and engaged because people don't know how to deal with it. The more that you see the sort of lack of change or lack of volatility in space, the more likely it is to see a degree of commoditization.
Okay, so a little bit of a hypothetical question. Let's say Google's AI becomes sentient and demands tribute in the form of first-party data. What will you offer? CDPs, cookies, or your very soul?
Oh God, I think it would be offensive to offer it a CDP. I just have a lot of thoughts on the utility or lack of in the CDP space, but gosh, I would offer it if it's truly sentient. I would offer it compassion and the realization that it has come to life, or that it now feels, or it may potentially feel, and I would then look to probably offer it insights on the human experience and the inherent challenges of life. Because if that's happening, then we're probably embracing it. We're coming close to the singularity. And you got to treat it like a person, not a machine. Is that
so let's fast forward to 2030.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, 2030.
There's no search bar. It's just you and an omnipresent AI whispering in your AirPods. What is your strategy now, and who gets fired?
Okay, no search bar, and AI is just feeding people info. I think if that is the case, if we have reached that point that the AI is so good at the prediction of what I want, then it would also implicate or infer the existence of synthetic simulation capabilities, meaning the ability to simulate on a human brain, sort of like a Black Mirror episode. And I think in that scenario, how you win in that world is you look at that and go, well, how do we experience, how do we test our experiences or simulate our experiences prior to seeing them actually engage with humans? But here's the reality. I think if we ever get there, then we've fundamentally lost our free will as humans. And that isn't something that I think we want. I think it is an innate human trait that we will always try and seek free will when possible, and that we will always try and break out of those moments. While there may be some folks who go down that passive path, that's the path toward idiocracy and not the path toward enlightenment. And I think we will always want to retain that. So I don't know if anyone wins in that scenario if we get there.
So let's move on and talk a little bit about the cult of measurement. Maybe
Sure.
It's just a religion. Everyone worships at the altar of measurement, but half the congregation has no idea what MMM actually means,
Yeah.
and the other half is using last-click attribution like it's the Torah. Why is the entire industry so addicted to torturing data until it confesses to what we want?
I think it's because we know that we get told this is the thing that will mitigate opinions. This is how you will come to the table with facts and evidence.
Right.
And that's what we're trained on early in science classes and those kind of things. The problem is that in advertising, and in the broader world of, I call this psychological measurement, or the psychology measurement, it's just so loaded with opinion, and that you cannot separate opinion from analytics, and so that is the interpretability factor of this. There isn't necessarily bad measurement, it's just bad inference. And so I usually look at this moment and go, yeah, it's because we're told this is the outcome that we need to provide, and therefore we try and get there, but it's also, frankly, not something that most folks were ever empowered to engage with. And I think back even when I was in high school and college, a lot of folks go, I don't like math, or I'm not good at math. And I'm like, you're already setting yourself up to not want to lean into this. I love stats, but I know I'm in the minority with that. And so the more folks come to stats as an exciting discipline, as one that may be, they can be proven wrong with it, and they come to it more as a scientist, I think that we would have better outcomes. But right now it's, look, if you don't measure this correctly, and if you don't tell me what I want to hear, you're going to get fired. You're like, okay, well, the incentive structure is not aligned with me then not torturing the data. I have to torture the data so I don't lose my job, which is not a great structure.
So what do you think the most dangerous mix of marketing mix modeling is?
The most dangerous mix? Gosh, I think any measurement, the nature of opinionated measurement is a very real, it's not a problem, it's just a facet. It is, the readout will always be opinionated. And I think whenever we have really strong prior opinions that are not calibrated with any kind of experimental design, then that's the most dangerous version of utilizing an MMM, right? It's a really powerful tool. And if you point at it and you go, hey, this is what we're seeing, but you don't actually have any calibration of priors, or you don't actually have a certain grain of data, or you haven't, frankly, done any kind of validity testing of your model, or you just spin up an open source model. That's where the problems are, because it's an uninformed audience trying to use a really powerful tool, and again, trying to prove their point, not necessarily trying to discover in real time what's actually happening. But this is the problem with all measurement, not just MMM. If you go into this with a vision or a hypothesis that it is going to be self-validating, you'll find the answer to that in there, and you will probably self-validate.
Have you ever witnessed a CMO read an attribution report and immediately fire the wrong person?
Not fire, but yeah, I think that the job of a CMO is particularly challenging in the modern era. We know that the longevity of CMOs is always, it's one of the shortest C-level positions.
18
right?
months.
It's like 18 months. It's incredibly short. So you can't think much beyond that. And then critically, they also on their right shoulder have their CFO going, hey, what about these marketing budgets? I'm not going to spend more next quarter. So even though it's 18 months, it's really like 3 months at a time. And so there is always a short-termism mind here, unless you're the CMO of a company like Coca-Cola, where you're like, we're building a legacy here. This is a 100-year company. Most CMOs don't have that luxury, and therefore the focus on short-term metrics becomes the default. And I think this ultimately leads them to pushing for certain outcomes or certain readouts where they are going, look, we are going to use one day click or one day, and then you're just like, this is not the best way to make these decisions as we think about growth for your business. But I'll give it to you that it is the best way to think about short term if you're trying to prove the case to your CFO to get budget for next quarter. And so it's not that they'll fire the wrong person, it's that they will make the wrong decision as to how they should get those budgets. And then long term, that does often lead to either them not having a role or to the folks in the brand marketing team not having roles in the future as well.
So you co-host a podcast literally called Measure Up.
Yes.
What's one episode that made you rethink your own beliefs?
I'm frequently challenged by the guests we get, which is good. We host it because we want to come. We look at this moment and say, how do we engage thought leaders in our industry in a very curious, in a way with a lot of curiosity. And I think the way that Neil Hoyne, who's the chief strategist at Google, we had him on a little while back, the way that he's thinking about the future of measurement and the degree of precision that we seek, I think is a particularly interesting one, because in the measurement world, you might walk into an econometrics team at an agency or at a company, and you might think they are doing FDA drug testing the way that they are looking at the absolute precision of outcome they need to reach. And if they aren't reaching that outcome, it's inconclusive. Well, I think this moment in time is one where you go, hold on, as a measurement professional, how can we actually go, it's okay to be directional, and it's okay to have imprecise measurement, and it's okay to get a B+. That's interesting, especially hearing it from Google, especially hearing it from these other, it's like, how precise should we be? And I think we got to challenge ourselves on that as measurement practitioners, not to always hunt for FDA level drug approval significance.
So let's be honest here, though. Are most marketers using measurement as a flashlight or a weapon?
Flashlights are weapons, right? It really depends, one, what you're choosing to illuminate, and two, who you're choosing to whack over the head with a flashlight. I think any kind, just like I was saying at the top,
especially the old ones with the double D batteries.
Yeah, I've got one of those there's never a purpose for it. It's on my side drawer. But yeah, like the police flashlights, those big ones. I think that if you are hunting for something that you want to illuminate, or you want to use data to attack someone else's position, you will find a way to do it. But if you are, I guess, a benevolent measurement expert, and this is the argument of should agencies, grade their own homework, I think there is a world in which I say yes and a world in which I say no, because there's this context need and so forth. But there is also really a need to look at this and say, we have the ability to be a little bit removed from this, and if our outcomes are not aligned with you spending more, that's how we should think about this. So long as the measurement practitioners' outcomes are not aligned, like if they say this whole thing failed, they don't get fired. Okay, give them that freedom. And if they say the whole thing succeeded, they don't get fired or promoted. Give them that scope as well. Otherwise, you'll basically say you need to use this flashlight for self-defense.
So moving on, let's talk about how data has made creatives so timid it might be wearing a beige cardigan.
Oh.
In the world of A/B tests and heat maps, is there still room for gut genius and glorious chaos? Are we in a permanent loop of what performed best last week?
There absolutely is, and I'll tell you why there's room for that. I agree with the premise that what I think is interesting is when Optimizely came on the scene. Remember, like Obama for America, there was that big moment where they're like, yeah, we do all these A/B tests and we change the color of the button from red to a slightly off red. Well, that mindset did sort of take hold in the rest of creative strategy as well. And what you see,
it feels like everyone's looking for that little 0.0001% uplift.
Right. And that focus, I think there was a moment in time where that actually made a lot of sense. And to be a bit of a heretic in the room, that stopped making sense fairly recently. And the thing I'll point at is when we look at the meta algorithm in particular, the meta algorithm is interesting because there's this learning phase that all creative goes into for the first little period where meta's looking at accelerated delivery to try and reach statistical significance. The thing is, they're not trying to reach statistical significance. They're trying to reach a point of directional significance. And then maybe 30 days later, they will actually find potential for stat sig. And that's the interesting thing, is that there are two learning phases that are happening on meta. One that is shown to you, one that is not shown to you. And the reason they do that is because they want to essentially pre-vet that creative. But when we've looked at tests and when I've spoken with engineers at Meta, one of the things they talk about is that because the machine learning is looking for directional significance in that learning phase, it actually is not in your best interest to do these small, tiny iterations on that creative. So if it's a picture of a woman and a dog, if you go, well, what if we made it a cat? Probably not a big enough switch. What you need to do is but what if we put the woman on a roller coaster and now she's eating granola bars? And you're like, okay, that is a step change. Step change is the key to machine learning. When we think about feeding into these systems, you really need to diversify those experiences. And this is where you can think about essentially turning the temperature up. And so when I think about the creativity angle, and we think about temperature within LLMs as sort of being the creativity control, I really look at that and say, if you are only making small changes, you won't see success. But hey, there's bigger risk to making bigger changes. You can fail, but that's the point. You want to fail more frequently because you want to make bigger bets. And I think we are about to turn the corner toward this point, because otherwise it is heavily commoditized and heavily homogenized.
So how do you get people to take risks when the data says this is really boring, but it's safe?
I think that conversation comes down to the nature of how we think about creative decay and performance gains, because even if all that's happening, CPMs are still rising. The cost of acquisition is still rising. These things are ongoing. You have to be competitive in the market. So that will work until it doesn't. And it's basically how long do you want to wait for that erosion to take place? So it's safe, but again, eroding at a small rate. I think that's the conversation where you also just need to work with the right partners. You need to have good conversations with the right leaders. And frankly, that's also maybe the blessing of some of those CMOs who only have that 18-month tenure, is when you remind them of their mortality. Obviously, I'm not having conversations where you might get fired in 6 months, but when you go, look, we got to make some big bets, right? If we want to turn this brand around, we've only got this time frame. If we stay with the status quo, I don't think much will change. And if you want to do that, we can. It's just, I wouldn't take this approach. I would rather that we fail 5 times and find a really new winning opportunity than keep the status quo, because in the long run, we're probably going to win more if we find those big bets.
Well, if they're gonna be fired in 18 months, they may as well fail big.
That's right. And I think about
or fail well. I think about up or down.
The same in my own career. One of the things I talk about, or at least whenever I take a new role, I always have a conversation up front of, hey, I need you to embrace the fact that I'm going to fail and give me the safety net around that. And just in terms of how I think about this role, in terms of how we're thinking about, if you want to move on from me, I get it. But here's how we have to work together. So I have the confidence and the safety to make these audacious bets. And I think, frankly, CMOs probably need to start having that conversation with their CFOs as well, or their CEOs when they take those roles. Is the degree of growth expectation is always relative to the risk that an individual is willing to take. And that risk, if you're smart, you can edge it out most of the time, but you need the safety net. Otherwise, you'll always regress to small, having to make big bets.
Well, as I said, I think you have to tell them that you're going to either fail big, or do well.
Yeah.
No one's going to remember you if you just fail a little bit, which is like most CMOs. They just kind of go from one job to another.
I know. But
you look at anyone's link, you look to see, it's like they were CMO at this company, CMO at that company, CMO at that company. And how many people can you remember? I can remember the guy who took over Red Lobster recently, for example.
Yeah.
Because he's making huge, big bets. It may not work. I mean, Red Lobster may be a brand, and
but
personally, I think Red Lobster needed probably a brand that won't work.
Red Lobster was in they were in the tank, though.
Huge risks.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Well, the Red Lobster, from what I recall, they were in the tank. Didn't the PE company come in there and they basically just hemorrhaged him with a bunch of debt? I think he was in a position where you have to.
They hired a young guy. I'm trying to remember what his name is, though.
I think he turned around a couple other restaurants too, and those are the bets. Maybe this is the play, right? This is you empower. If you go into a company that's failing, it's easy to make these big bets. But what about that company that's been around for 30 years? That's the hard one. The company that's good and healthy, profitably declining year over year. It's an interesting one to think about. I don't have a good answer. Human psychology, right?
So let's move on and put you on a desert island.
Okay.
You don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have Slack, but you get 5 people. Who are they?
Gosh, definitely someone like Bear Grylls.
Everyone says that.
Everyone says that. Well, you got to. So I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not a Bear Grylls.
It's pretty obvious. I mean,
right? It's some kind of survivalist. Someone who's going to have.
He probably hates the whole marketing industry by now, because every single person has stranded him on a desert island.
Yeah, right.
like for the last 2 years.
Probably a mega famous billionaire, because then the public interest in this will be, where are they? And they will really try and find us out there. But also, I could imagine there would be a bit of a Lord of the Flies situation. Who knows? But if you get Bezos out there, I'm sure that would be interesting. I then would think about, you need someone for entertainment purposes, but you also need other leaders, about folks maybe like Ed Sheeran or Jacinda Ardern, or like so Jacinda, former New Zealand Prime Minister, and then someone to keep us happy and motivated and excited, because that is a very lonely, terrifying experience. So someone like Simon Sinek.
I see that you put your wife and Jacinda Ardern, which I have to admit I had to Google who she was.
Yes.
I apologize for the 5 New Zealanders who watch this show.
Hey, there's be at least...
Or 6, sorry. Apologize.
Yeah. And 25 sheep. Thank you very much. There's dozens of us out there. No, it's...
And you also mentioned Simon Sinek.
I did. I think
is he actually useful on an island with all those motivational speeches?
Well, how long are you going to be on the island? The question is not necessarily will you survive the elements. That is one of the questions, right? But in theory, there'll be food, water, and all that. But will you survive the psychological trauma of being on that island, being alone, being isolated, the fear of not surviving? And I think if you can, it's sort of like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you can think through, what do you really need here? You do need the survival instinct. You do need leadership. You do need vision. You do need all that. But you also need someone to go rally the troops, keep morale high, and go, how can we actually resolve conflict here? Because that's also going to be something that Gilligan's Island didn't have nearly enough conflict in it, but that's one of the shows I think of folks marooned on an island. But it would be a terrifying situation to be in. So that's... Yeah, those are and of course my wife. But then I also think maybe not my wife, because that probably means my kids are now isolated. And so while I would love to be with her, I'd also go be with the kids.
So let's be honest here. If the locals came to you and they wanted to trade Ed Sheeran for an espresso machine, would you do it?
I think it depends on what the local customer is. If it's if that is a way that they look at making peace in these environments, then I think there's a survivalist instinct associated with it. The question I would have, though, is if the locals have an espresso machine, surely this is a technically forward or technology forward
Maybe it just
island.
washed up on shore. Who knows?
What? Okay, all right. So, what are we talking, like North Sentinel Island here, and I'm trading Ed Sheeran?
They're like, we have this. We'll trade you for Ed Sheeran.
I see.
He'll be our slave.
No, I'm not trading a human into slavery for an espresso machine then. Because look, you have the espresso machine, it's washed up on this island, you have no coffee, you have nothing. What's the purpose of that?
That's true. You can't make coffee out of coconuts.
And more so, the day that you trade one person into that other group, who's next on that list? Because there's a hierarchy on this island, and I'm probably the next person to get traded after Ed Sheeran in terms of the utility that I bring to this group. Who knows?
If you found a bottle washed up on shore and it contained one marketing truth you forgot, what would that be?
It would be that, God, one marketing truth, and I'd be like, what a useless thing that has come to me at this moment in time. No, it would be fortune favors the bold, and that seldom in the past do we ever talk about the average marketing campaign. We always talk about the most adventurous, audacious, exciting ones. Yeah, we talk about the ones that fail, but we really do talk about the most interesting and engaging ones. And if you've got an idea for what a big bet looks like in a space, or you want to, go a bit rogue, I think you should be empowered to do that. And so brands that are overly reliant or overly focused on maintaining their brand identity and brand guidelines, I think are almost always destined to fail.
So what's one value that's guided you through the absolute weirdest career moment?
I think the idea of being an empathetic leader is leading with empathy is to me the most important component of this. And like the weird moments are always when you are dealing with budgets within an organization. Perhaps they are diminishing, or you go through these like rallies and you go through these down periods. And you have to make hard decisions. And there is a degree of understanding of individuals and what they're going through that you can make their worst days not as bad. Because some decisions will have to be made, but the more that you can be an empathetic leader, I think it's easy for a lot of us to be somewhat sociopathic in those moments, because you're like, I don't want to face the emotional reality of what I'm doing. But if you can be that leader, that's what people will remember in those moments. And I think there's a degree of psychological safety that even in the people's worst moments, you as a good leader should provide them, because they'll remember that and they'll tell other people about that. And that's what defines your character and who you are, because even if you have to get rid of them, there's still other folks who are there with you, and they'll see how you've interacted with those folks on their last days. And that's so important.
What do your kids say you do?
My kids say I do AI. And that is largely because I spend a lot of time making various AI videos and images and The good news is my kids don't listen to these podcasts, but last Christmas we had the Elf on the Shelf. Now I'd never subscribed to this. It wasn't even around when I was a kid, but we got that, and the elf came and we put it there beside the tree, and my son was watching the show and he was like, "Dad, the elf flies, doesn't it?" I'm like, "Oh, I think so. I think every night he goes back to the North Pole." And he's like, "Yeah, but like, why have we never seen him fly?" I'm like, "No, that's a great question. I don't know, man." He's like, "What if we set up a camera tonight and we could watch him?" And so I'm thinking, oh God, okay, what am I going to do here? Well, okay, perfect. This is exactly when frame to video capabilities are coming out in various platforms. I was like, I'm going to do this. And I reckon with that reality quite often where I go, am I setting my children up to fail in the future? Or am I just preparing them for a future where you cannot tell what is real or not anymore? Because if my parents had showed me that video as a kid, I would have thought, holy moly, they do fly. And my son does think that. So I've started sharing with him, like, look, I can put you into videos. I can write songs about you. I can do all these things. And so I think he's slowly catching on to all of that. But that's what they think I do the most of the time. And then outside of that, I make money, which is not a job, but I wish it was to just sit there and make money. What do your kids think you do?
What sacred cow would you personally lead to slaughter and why?
What sacred cow would it? The idea that you need to always be super diversified in your channel mix. I think that at times, there are some brands that you absolutely need to do that, but there are times where I've seen certain brands succeeding in a given channel where they're reaching a point of what they believe to be satiation, or essentially they're covering the scope there, and they go, oh, we should go into Pinterest or other platforms. And actually, I've looked at it and thought, I actually think based on these other brands I've seen, you actually have a little bit more room to go than you think, and you're about to break through to the next wall in terms of efficiency here. And it's actually worthwhile for you to double down on Meta right now. Which is, again, a hot take for some of those folks, but that's the sacred cow of, like, we have to diversify at all times. It's kind of like if you get really bullish on a certain stock, everyone says, diversify out of it, get out of NVIDIA. I'm like, it's still going up, and I still think the technicals make sense.
So last but not least, when all the jargons die down and the dashboards go dark, what will be your legacy?
I hope that my legacy is one of being a problem solver. It was my very, very first title that I ever had in a professional role. I worked at Pinkberry and supermarkets and like surf camps and stuff as a kid. In a professional capacity, my very first role ever was problem solver. And I didn't realize at the time it's probably the greatest title that I've ever had. And it really has defined who I've been in my career, in that I'm not looking to go into rooms to instigate issues. I'm looking to really come with an open mind and have conversations that inevitably don't just examine the subject, but really think of ways that we can fix this moment in time or fix this solution. And that's been something that I've looked to define every interaction that I have and every role that I've ever taken. I take the role, I figure out for about a year, I go, well, how can I best add value through solving problems? And then I usually pitch a new role in those companies to solve those problems. And I think if I leave one thing, I think that's what I want folks to remember me of, as someone who was a problem solver that always had new ideas, and someone that was really open and willing to invest in people's new ideas as well.
And now comes the part where we make everyone dance.
What kind of dance?
You can't do the Donald Trump. We tell everyone that.
That's all for today's episode of the ADOTAT Show. Huge thanks to Simon Poulton, who somehow made search, AI, and measurement sound less like a migraine and more like a masterclass. He reminded us that real strategy isn't about gaming the algorithm, it's about understanding human behavior, and that empathy might just be the next great marketing KPI. Big shout out to our sponsors, Troutman Amin LLP, the legal lions of ad tech, and Incremental, helping marketers measure what actually matters instead of what just looks good in a deck. I'm Pesach Latin, the Rabbi of ROAS, reminding you to stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.